Okay, well, welcome. I'm really glad that you're here. I'm Brent Gensel. I'm the pastor at First Baptist Church in Kaufman. And again, we're so thankful for your hospitality and your willingness to meet with us here. We met with a group from Dallas late last week, and one of the churches that was kind of on the line about doing this or not came to the meeting and listened through the whole conversation. And when they got finished, the chairman of their mission committee turned to their pastor and said, "We've got to do this. This thing is the kind of thing our grandkids are going to read about in books generations from now." And so I like that. And I think that it might be just exactly right. It's a unique thing for Texas Baptists across the whole state to rally for something like this. The need in Ukraine is unusual, and our opportunity there, I think, is great. And again, I'm thankful that you would listen to the Spirit and follow Him into this. I think what we're about to do is going to be really important. Let me tell you a little bit about how we got here. In April, maybe early May, Julio Guanari, who is the executive director of our Texas Baptist Convention, got a phone call from the executive director of the Ukrainian Baptist Union. And I don't know how much you know about that particular body of believers, but it represents about 2,000 Baptist churches across Ukraine. And our church has worked in Europe for over 20 years. And I am convinced that that group of believers, those 2,000 churches, are the strongest evangelistic witness that we have in Europe. They are deeply committed to Scripture. They believe in evangelism. They're passionate about church planting. In fact, this group of Baptist believers between Perestroika in the early 90s and 2014, when Crimea was taken, started over 400 churches in Russia and in the countries along the southern part of what once was the USSR, Tajikistan, all the way to Pakistan, actually. Beyond, they were busy planting churches and expanding the gospel. And then, of course, now war has come across the country and things have changed. So now when Dr. Guanari got the phone call, the executive director said, "We need help. Texas Baptists have been good friends to us across the last many years, and many of our global partners, for one reason or another, have stepped away during the course of the war. We're facing a significant mental health challenge and a significant leadership challenge as a convention, and we could use some friends and some help." It had just happened that a month earlier, I had been in Europe speaking at a conference for Ukrainian pastors who have started churches all over Europe. You may not know this, but many of the Ukrainians that left Ukraine have launched new churches all across Europe. In fact, over 160 new churches have been planted by Ukrainians as they have left their home country and gone all over Europe. And it really does represent the possibility of God doing something really unique out of something really horrible. Many of those churches will be stronger evangelistic witnesses in their community than the German churches that have been there for over a century. And so they believe that about themselves, and it's exciting to see what will happen with those churches as well. Anyway, after I spoke, I sat at lunch, and one of the members of the executive team from Kyiv had come to Bonn, Germany, to be a part of the conference and encourage the people that were there. And in our conversation, he had said to me, "You know what, we're facing this significant mental health challenge. And is there any way that you could help?" And I don't know, if you had been sitting there, you might have said the same thing I said reflexively. I mean, man, that's incredible that you're facing this challenge. I'll sure pray about it. And then on my flight back home, the Holy Spirit began to disturb me that maybe prayer was great, but there were other things that we could do, the Texas Baptists could do, maybe to step in the gap. And I just began making notes about what was possible. I took a couple of weeks to do that. And then I sent it to Julio, and I just said, I know you may think this is crazy, but here's the encounter that I had. I think that God wants Texas Baptists to step up and do something in this situation, and that we have the capability to do it. And here's kind of some things on my mind. The next morning, he calls me, and he said, "I just had the conversation with the executive director of the Ukrainian Baptist Union, and I told him Texas Baptists would help, but we don't have any plans for how we're supposed to do that. And now you've kind of come forward with this as an independent journey to get to it. And we think God's in this. Would you meet with us?" So we've spent the last summer working through a new partnership agreement between Texas Baptist and Ukrainian Baptist for how it is that we really could be of the most help to this group of churches. Ukraine and Texas share a lot of things in common. Ukrainian population now is almost exactly the population of the state of Texas, about 30 or so million people in both countries. They've had a lot of people that have left, but we stand at about the same place now. Geographically, Ukraine is about 15% less in landmass than Texas. It is still a huge country, largest in Europe, and you can kind of see the comparison that is there. The Ukrainian people are a tough and resilient people. They have a lot of things about their history that causes them to be proud of who they are and about who they have become as a people. All over the world now, you see the Ukrainian flag. I often have thought if Texas was invaded, the Texas flag would be equally ubiquitous. Like we both are proud of our country, proud of our flag. There's something about a deep sense of commitment to the place where we are that's true about this people in the same way it is true about Texans. They have been through so much. The war, of course, has been devastating, and they've lost so many people throughout the course of this. It started in a difficult way for the Baptist Union that's there. Many Ukrainian churches, Baptist churches, prior to the war, were committed theological pacifists. And the story of how they got there is a long one. If your church had been under Soviet control for 70 years, maybe that's where you would have ended too. But whatever the case, when the war looked like it was going to begin, there were a number of Ukrainians that left immediately because they didn't believe that they should be in a position where they should take up arms. And so this meant that many of the Ukrainian churches were suddenly without pastors and often core leaders. But they were still having to minister in one of the most difficult moments in the history of the country. And so in many cases, there were people that were called out of the congregation to come in and pastor or begin pastoring who hadn't been to seminary and didn't really have the training, but somebody had to lead. And I think that as we get into this, we're going to run into a lot of those kinds of people who just said, somebody's got to step up, and I'm willing to do that. And so they've taken on that burden, and they're beginning to lead. What's really been amazing is that through the course of these years, a lot of the churches that had dropped by half in attendance have filled up with brand new believers. And we heard this story over and over and over again. Like our church was at 250. We were suddenly at 125. We're back at 250 again, but the 125 people that have come are people that weren't believers before the war. So now they have this incredible discipleship challenge that they're facing. And so there's a challenge on the mental health front, obviously, as they're dealing with all kinds of trauma and they're working through the PTSD issues that are, of course, connected to anyone who's been in the war. And then on top of that, they also have a significant discipleship challenge. And how do we kind of help these people? And often people are driving the discipleship effort who weren't trained in, helping people to grow as disciples. So they're learning as they go. So all these challenges that are in front of them, and they're the things that they have brought to the table, and they have asked for our help that we could step in and make a difference. So as we visited with them about how that might come to pass, my request was that if Texas Baptists were going to take this on, that we would do it in a way that, to my knowledge, we've never really done before in a widespread way, and that is that we would do it church to church, that we would focus on the importance and the power and the capacity of the local church, both here and in Ukraine, and that the foundation for this partnership among Texas Baptists and Ukrainian Baptists would primarily be about the local church. And so as we've worked through that, we've talked about a strategy that would involve 50 flagship Texas Baptist churches partnering with 50 flagship Ukrainian Texas Baptist churches. And the Ukrainians wanted to step toward 50 because there are 25 Ukrainian oblasts. That's their political states. And so they want to choose two churches for each oblast, two of their flagship churches in each of those oblasts. And as they come into a partnership with two of our churches, those four churches would sort of create a core for that oblast that would then multiply over the course of the years that followed. If we're shooting the moon on this, it would be that we would find a partnership church in Texas for every one of those 2,000 Ukrainian Baptist churches. And I don't know if we'll get to that or not, but it is what we want to aim for. But it begins with these first 50. As your church steps into this, you're going to be paired with somebody in Texas. You're going to be paired with two churches in Ukraine. You'll have a direct church-to-church partnership with one of those Ukrainian churches. You'll begin to talk about what does it look like for us to be of help in your place, to minister to you in your context, and then the conversation as things get rolling and we learn some things about all this will be, who do we know that we could bring along with us? Who else in our region of the state might get help? What churches among their churches are in need and would welcome the help of another Texas Baptist church or family. So this is the big vision about where we might head. Of course, the foundation of all of this is that our belief that for all the good that NGOs and other nonprofits may do in the short term, often they're really good in acute care, that the local church is the only institution that'll be with you 20 years from now. and that many of the pains and the difficulties and the struggles that this group of people are going through now, it will continue not for a few months but for decades. And it's important that the local church be present to be the help, and we believe that. So we think by strengthening the local church in Ukraine, we can do the most good for the nation of Ukraine, and certainly can do the most good for the gospel. And so this is the goal, is to strengthen the church. And your partnership as a church will take a different form from everybody else's, but the goal for all of us will be the same. Let's strengthen the local church in Ukraine, that the church can be the hero there and can step in and do what only the church of Jesus can do in those contexts. So these are sort of the foundational things that are in play as we kind of get started. I have found the Ukrainian people to be eager and to be rugged and to be passionate about their people and about the gospel. Their leadership is amazing and resilient. The core leadership there came into position of responsibility right before Crimea. And so they've had a long history, over 10 years worth of consistent leadership in Ukraine, and they have been amazing. Before the war even started, as sabers were being rattled from Putin and other places, they began to make a plan for how they would mobilize in the event that war broke out. And it really was amazing that when Putin crossed the northern boundary with Ukraine, they immediately activated. And they had created a system to move refugees away from harm's path all the way across the country and out of harm, and it immediately began to work. And one of the stories we heard in Dallas was about a mayor of one of the communities that was in the northeastern part of Ukraine, where the first violence happened, and the city was overrun, and they kind of whisked the mayor out of the community so that he wouldn't be taken captive. And like over the next 2 days, he was moved from church to church to church to church across Ukraine until he got to safety. And at the end of it all, he wasn't Baptist. I mean, he was just a guy who really didn't know much about Baptists at all. And he was like, how did you pull that off? Like, you knew people everywhere. Like, everywhere we went, you had the ability to provide what we needed. And it's just one of the most beautiful examples of the mobilization of the body of Christ. And you may or may not be aware that just a few months ago, Elijah Brown, who, of course, is the president of our Baptist World Alliance and also a Texas guy, was invited to come to Ukraine to receive a Medal of Honor from Zelensky, celebrating the contribution Baptists had made to Ukraine throughout the war. And it's an interesting thing. We traveled to Ukraine about, I guess, 5 weeks ago because they wanted to see us face to face before they would move ahead with the MOU. And we were really ready by July to move forward, and they were like, we don't want to do this until we see you face to face, which I thought was an unusual request, but a couple of us loaded up and we went and spent some time with them in Ukraine. And I came to understand that, like, going there in the midst of the time of the war is just a big deal to them. It's something about the solidarity of it, or maybe demonstrating enough courage to make them believe that they can believe the partnership will stick. But whatever the case, those days together were good days, and we got to know them face to face. But Elijah's coming to Kyiv was a big deal. And all over Ukraine, they're talking now about the fact that the Pope has never been to Kyiv during the war, and the head of the Eastern Orthodox Church has never been to Kyiv during the war. But the Baptist Pope showed up to see us face to face. So they don't quite have the right vocabulary to talk about what Elijah is, so they call him the Baptist Pope. But for them, Elijah represents, like, the courage and the commitment of Baptists to the people of Ukraine. And for the Ukrainian Baptists, it's a huge breakthrough. Of course, this country is primarily Eastern Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, and now Ukrainian Orthodox, rather separated away from the Russian connections there, of course. But the Orthodox is the dominant religious tone in Ukraine. And so for Baptists to have this visibility and to have been used by God in these ways across the country has just opened up the opportunities for the gospel in those churches in a way that it just has never been before. And it's one of the ways that it just looks like what Satan has intended for evil, God is going to use for good, and is the midst of doing that. So this is the Melu. This is the environment that we step into, and it's a pretty good one. There's a lot going on there that God has done ahead of us, and these people, again, are tough and resilient. I can't imagine it was not a significant thing for the president of their convention to pick up the phone and call Julio and ask for help. Like, I don't know that it was his first impulse. And for him to do it, I think, was a significant step, and a courageous thing for him to do it, a humble thing to do it. And I'm glad that we as Texas Baptists have the opportunity to answer this particular call and request. You've got a little packet in front of you, and if I could turn your attention to that real quickly. The first pages there are our MOU, and there have been some revisions. To some of you have seen this before. There have been a few revisions since maybe the last time you saw this. The Ukrainians had a couple of things that they wanted to add that we put in over the last week or two. So what you're holding is pretty hot off the press. But our strategy is really fourfold. I mean, as we talked about before, it's built on this church-to-church partnership notion as a foundation, and there are 4 phases. Phase number 1 is a time of pairings and prayer and preparation, and that will begin, maybe now, but certainly on the 18th of November. On the 18th of November, we're going to gather in Abilene at the convention. Hardin Simmons has agreed to host an event where we will sign the MOU. The executive director and his vice president of international relations are going to come from Kyiv to be here with us in Abilene on the 18th. And on that day, Julio will sign, and we will officially launch this partnership together. And on that day, the first thing that's going to happen is that we're going to begin with pastor-to-pastor friendships. And this was the Ukrainians' idea. They are a relational people. And this will be the first thing. And they even mentioned in one meeting early on, like a lot of our pastors need encouragement and they need friendship. They feel alone in the world. They feel globally cut off. And it will be a huge thing for them to feel like there is some other pastor, there is somebody out there who cares about them and willing to hear their stories and pray with them. And so we can surely do that. And so we'll begin with that on the 18th. On that day, we will distribute the partnership pairings, give out the WhatsApp phone numbers, and we'll begin the pastor-to-pastor partnerships. The next step will be a prayer network that we want to launch on January the 1st. We would ask your church to put together a team of people who would commit to pray for Ukraine and specifically your partner church. The Ukrainian churches will do the same. And on January 1st, we would ask your group to make the first contact with the Ukrainian group to begin praying together and to set up a consistent back and forth of prayer needs and concerns. We also are in the process in this first phase of developing a joint trauma care training manual. And this is something that we're doing. Some of the best minds in trauma care in the United States have already agreed to partner with us. Jennifer is going to be collaborating with them to write a manual whose purpose is to kind of outline these are some basics about trauma care, and then also to put together a list of sort of test cases or case studies. If this happened, what would you do? If this happened, if you got a person who came to you with these problems or struggles, how would you handle it? And here's our best thoughts about how to do it. Our American partners, which I think will be 3 or 4 authors on our side, will be pairing with 3 or 4 Ukrainian authors. And I think this is one of the most important things about this particular resource. There's a lot of global resources on trauma, but this in particular I think is important because the Ukrainians are going to have a voice in telling their story and their experiences with dealing trauma in their context as a part of what we're trying to develop. And I think as a result, this is going to be more broadly received in Ukraine because it's going to have their fingerprints all over it. So I'm thankful for those that will work together to create this training manual. We'll distribute it across Ukraine, and we'll translate it, of course, into English so that all of our leaders will be able to have access to it. We'll understand the vocabulary they're using and what they're up against. And so that trauma manual will be in the works right away. We're also in the process of developing worship for the movement. We just feel like the spiritual and the emotional part of this struggle is so real. And music is one of the things that binds us together already as people of God. And so our rather lofty goal is that we would produce 2 albums of music, 15 songs that are traditional in format, 15 songs that are contemporary in format, that are jointly written by Ukrainian and Texas musicians. So over the next several months, we want to step in and we want to write music for this movement. And there's a lot of detail about that, but this particular piece is a piece that we'll launch pretty quickly. And we're going to be looking for the best artists, the best musicians that Texas has to offer that can come to this work, and the Ukrainians are going to be doing the same. And so this music for the movement is one of the pieces that will start soon. So that's phase 1. There's a lot of other preparation you kind of see on the next page that'll be taking place in the meantime. We are in the process right now of writing a 7-week spiritual growth campaign that churches on both sides of the partnership would share at the time that they see as most appropriate. And this spiritual growth campaign is built on the Great Commission and the Great Commandment The idea is that churches on both sides of the partnership would be walking through a 7-week conversation about the Great Commission, Great Commandment. They'd be doing Bible studies on Great Commission, Great Commandment in small groups. They'd be reading devotionals that were written by pastors on both sides of the partnership. And the small groups would be, at least some of them would be meeting together at least 3 or 4 times across the 7 weeks. So I know some of you are small group discipleship guys. I mean, we envision an opportunity for people in Texas who will never travel to Ukraine to have the opportunity to study the Bible and pray with people in Ukraine around the Great Commission and the Great Commandment as a way of kind of beginning this partnership. So we're in the process of writing this right now. The seminary in Odessa, which is in the southeastern part of Ukraine, has agreed to participate in this, and they're already in the process of helping us to write and to adapt. And it's been a joy to work with them, and I'm excited about what will come out of that. We're also in the process of trying to begin to develop a mental health network, or we soon will be. Our goal in this regard is that there would be a network of Texas Baptist psychologists and Christian counselors who are connected with pastors in Ukraine. I think if we could shoot the moon on this, it would be that every one of these pastors, at least the first 50, would have access to someone in Texas who they could go to if something happens in their congregation that seems like it's over their head, or if they just would like some advice about how do I deal with this or that trauma situation that's suddenly come to the door of our church. And this may not be that they're setting up a direct counseling appointment with somebody that's Ukrainian, but they can coach that pastor. And obviously, mental health resources are really thin right now in Ukraine. And if we could provide somebody that could be out there to be a lifeline for every pastor, I think it would give them some great confidence. So we'll be in the process of developing that network. We're also going to begin working on an evangelism and church planting strategy. Our Texas Baptist church planting team has already agreed to kind of be a part of this process. Earlier, there may have been a picture up there of the guys that we met with while we were in Ukraine. So the Ukrainians brought 4 people to the meeting. And the 4 people that they brought to this meeting about how we could be of help to them are the executive director, that's the guy on the far right, the international director, which is the guy in the blue shirt, the head of their chaplains division, which is the 4th guy over, his name is Vasily, and then the guy in the white shirt is the guy that's in charge of church planting for Ukrainians. And just amazing to me that their head is like, we're in the middle of a war, we've got all these problems, but church planting is such a priority that guy needs to be at the table while we're working this out. And so it was impressive to me, and I wouldn't want you to miss what it says about the heart of this church in this moment. And so they're the ones that insisted that church planting be central to our MOU, and so it will be. And we've begun work already building the relationships there to kind of begin to put together strategies for church planting as we move forward. We're also in the process of fortifying a sports camp network, English camp strategies, ramp and runway opportunities, and local mental health ministry strategies. All this stuff is stuff that's already kind of begun and will develop over the coming months. This is all a part of phase 1. Phase 2, I think, launches when the war is over, hostilities have ceased, and it is now safe to be in Ukraine. And it begins with a conference in Kyiv, where our local leadership in Texas travels there to be a part of this moment. Their leadership travels from Ukraine to be in Kyiv. All 50 churches, all 100 churches will be represented in that moment. And we'll celebrate and worship and thank God for the end of the war and pray for what's ahead. And then the Texas Baptist churches will travel to their communities after the conference is over with for their first opportunity to meet the church, to see the place that they've been listening and praying for these months. And then that will kind of step us into phase number 2. Spiritual growth campaign, we think, happens not long after that. That there'd be a time pretty quickly where you would do this joint experience across 7 weeks as a church, and the Texas Mental Health Network would launch not too long after that. So that happens in phase 2. Now, phase 3, things get a lot more open-handed. You've been visiting with your church, you're getting to know their needs. We're going to try to provide you with as many partners and turnkey sort of modules or solutions as we can. But it'll be up to your church and their church to work out what are we going to do and what are we going to do next and how are we going to go about doing it. And we want to give a lot of freedom. Ukraine's like Texas, a lot of different regions, a lot of different kinds of churches, a lot of different needs, a lot of different communities. And so we feel like at this point that we need to turn free and let every individual partnership kind of develop as it will. Right now, there are several modules that we kind of want to suggest or put before you. One of those is, of course, the possibility of sports camps. The idea of going in and doing sports camps. We've done a lot of baseball camps in Europe and had a lot of success with those. So that's one possibility. But flag football or basketball or volleyball, there's a lot of ways it could go. And again, you'll work that out in partnership. Some of the communities don't have soccer fields anymore because they've been bombed. And so like the idea of doing a baseball camp isn't really even practical because there's no space to do it at this point. So there'll be some creativity around that if that's what you decide to do. But we see this as a great opportunity to get our students and our young adults involved in this partnership and get a connection made at that generational level with the churches, and are hopeful that that will take place. We've been visiting with several of our Baptist colleges across the state. They're pretty fired up about this possibility of sending groups or being a part of churches that are sending groups. Some of the sports teams, baseball and softball teams, have got interest in helping out. So I have a lot of excitement about this part of it. And Buckner's and One More Child, which is sort of the Florida version of Buckner, have both agreed to come alongside us to help us in these moments. And what we envision happening is that they will either train us or they'll go with us to meet with moms and dads while baseball camp or sports camp's going on, to talk about trauma care and how to deal with certain things and what to be watching for with your kid now in the next 2 or 3 years. They both have done trauma on a global scale before, and they're willing to partner with us as we go in. So I'm very excited about that. So sports camps is one of the places that we want to be involved. Another place in this next phase that we think there's potential, and really maybe before, is in the worship space. So not only are we talking about writing this music, but in conversation with the president at the seminary in Odessa, one of the things that I was surprised by, and maybe I shouldn't have been, because looking back in the meeting that we had in Ukraine, I think I'd heard the executive director mention something along these lines, and later it kind of made sense. But the president of the seminary at Odessa says to me, there are some of our Ukrainian churches that aren't singing anymore in worship. And I'm like, help me understand that, unpack that for me, Alexander. And he said, like, there's just nobody left in the church who can lead worship because they've either been conscripted or they've been killed in the war or they've left the country. And so the church doesn't know what to do with worship. And so like there is a great need to rebuild the worship leaders all across the nation. And so I thought that's going to ring some bells in Texas. We've got some people that will care about that. And so one of the things that we have kind of secured is that the Worship Initiative, which is Robbie C. and Shane's crowd, have just launched sort of their online digital resource center 2.0. And it provides step-by-step how to play these songs by guitar, piano, drums, percussion, whatever the thing is. I think the library's got 300 or 400 or 500 songs in it. It's really incredible. They've also provided some sort of just theology of worship and basics about worship leadership. All that video resource they're going to make available to any of our 50 partner churches. And so if you're a worship pastor and you get into a conversation with your church and they've got a need for worship development, you're going to have a really nice tool to help you to navigate and figure out, how do we do this, or how can we help? And of course, the language barrier is going to be a thing. We'll talk about that more in just a moment, but this tool it's the one of a kind. There's not another one like it in the world. And I'm grateful that the folks at Worship Initiative are willing to come alongside us and help us in this way. So that might be one of the initiatives early on that your church decides we need to help them to strengthen their worship ministry of their church. By the way, about 50% of the churches in Ukraine are traditional in their worship style, and about 50% are contemporary. And so they're going to navigate this in different ways. For some of the churches that are no longer singing, their choir's been devastated. And that's always the way they worshiped. And so they're trying to figure out, without a choir, how do we worship? We've never done this before. And then on the contemporary side, we don't have anybody that can lead or whatever. So the worship piece is significant. Another strategy that's out there we think to be grabbed a hold of is the English Camp or English Initiative. A couple of months ago, now the Ukrainian government officially declared that English is now the language of business for all of Ukraine. So as you might guess, it used to be Russian, but they're not really all that keen of it continuing to be. And so they're shifting to English as the official language of commerce and business in Ukraine. However, most of the Ukrainian children were not brought up learning English. Has not been a part of their school system. So there's a lot of people in Ukraine right now that are looking to figure out, how do we learn English so we can participate in the Western economies and to fortify the economies in our own communities. So we feel like this is a great opportunity for the local church to step up and say, if you'd like to learn English, we can help you. And not only that, we can connect you with English speakers from the States who can help you to practice and to mature in your ability to do the English. So this was something we were committed to early on, and we began the process of trying to get prepared. Or where are we going to find curriculum? Are we going to have to write this curriculum? Could we write a gospel-centered curriculum for learning English? And then I had lunch with the Gotts. Michael and Jane Gott have been doing evangelism in Eastern Europe for a long time, 25, 35 years, and a lot of time in Ukraine. In fact, I think Michael is 84, and they have been in Ukraine on evangelistic crusades 12 times since the war started. Amazing guy, amazing story. Anyway, I'm doing lunch with them, and we're talking about all this business. I mentioned about the English thing, and it comes up that they already have this curriculum. They've been using it for 2 decades. They wrote it themselves, and it's already in place. And they wrote me to say, we're willing to lend this curriculum to your movement. We want to be supportive in any way we can. And I was like, well, I think we're very interested in using your curriculum, and so thankful that it already exists. And then I got kind of some stories about how they had used it and its success as an evangelistic tool across Ukraine across all these years. The next letter I get back from Michael Gott says, we've been praying about this and talking to our network. We've identified 50 people across Texas who've already been trained in how to use this curriculum and have done so before. And we can provide a mentor for every single one of the first 50 churches who's willing to personally invest in your people to teach them how to do this if they want to do it. A beautiful gift, incredible thing that God had already been preparing. So if your church wants to step into English camp strategies or English ministry strategies, there's potential for that. Ramps and runways is another possibility. Is if you traveled Europe, it's not particularly handicap accessible. And obviously there's a lot of people that are coming back from the war that have disabilities and are in wheelchairs and such. Most of the churches are not handicap accessible. Many of the homes are not handicap accessible. This seems like a thing that is like Taylor built for a bunch of Texans to go and build ramps. And Texas Baptist Men are already in the process of helping us draw up some plans that we'll make available as sort of things that churches could take with them to build ramps in a variety of different settings across Ukraine. If this is the kind of thing that you've got people in your church that would want to go do, we think it'd be a great way to make the local churches in Ukraine heroes in their communities. And then the last of those is the possibility of mental health ministries being started locally in the churches that are there. This is a pretty hefty lift, and we put it at the end of all this because there's a lot of challenges to be able to do this. They need it, and there's a lot of need for this, but there is a built-in sort of resistance to psychology generally in Ukraine because for 7 decades, the Russians used psychology as a tool to twist and to turn and manipulate people. And most Ukrainians have this feeling about psychology that it's bad or it's something they should be leery about. So they obviously need help, and their leadership has said, we've got this major mental health crisis. The seminary team that I spoke with said, we don't have any aversion to psychology, but you should know much of the country does. And so the church seems like one of the best avenues, a trusted source and voice to be able to carry the things that we know that could really be helpful to people. But we got to be careful about how we do it, and we'll learn on the way about how to be about it. Kay Warren, however, has agreed to let us use her Hope for Mental Health resources and translate those into Ukrainian. That they've started mental health ministries all across the country, and if that's helpful to us, then we're going to have that resource available to us as we kind of step forward in all this. So these are all sort of some of the ideas that surround phase 3. This moment we're able to get into the country and we're able to go. These are the kinds of things that we'll be going and doing as God opens the doors for us to do this. And, as you're sitting here or in the hours afterward, if God lays another thought on your head about, this is the kind of thing that could be replicated and done all across the country, then we'll add it. Our hope is that we're in the process of developing an online presence. You'll have the password, been able to get in and then download the resources for any of these modules you might want to use. If you've got an idea about something else, create us a module, and we'll put it there and we'll share that together and try to make a difference. Then phase 4 is the expansion phase, and this would be the moment I think that once your church has been there a while doing this, that you would be ready to say, well, are there other churches in the area that we could help? Can we find partners to come alongside these other places that are near the obelisk where we are? And so this is the plan. The next question might be about the timing, and obviously some of this is really contingent on how things go with the war. I think in our minds right now, we're sort of thinking about if the war were to end in the spring, what would we do? How would it go? Maybe by late April, we're ready to go have this event in Kyiv. Maybe by the fall of 2026, we're ready to have the spiritual growth campaigns. That would be like the quickest timeline. If it's longer than that, then maybe we begin to adjust. But this is one of the things the Ukrainians got back to us about in the last few weeks. And down there on page, whatever page that is, at the bottom of phase 4, it says contingency protocol. And it said phase 1 will remain effective indefinitely under an ongoing war mode. All 13 preparatory initiatives, including the prayer effects on the sevens, pastoral video calls, the trauma manual, and the spiritual growth campaign will continue in a fully digital format. Spiritual growth campaign will be implemented in 2026 regardless of wartime conditions. Phase 2, travel activities will be suspended and replaced with a secure online global summit and a live stream campaign to maintain unity and engagement across participating regions. Phase 3 initiatives, camps, and crusades will shift to localized micro projects in designated safe zones, Western Oblast, or border hubs led and funded locally. Activation of the full Phase 3 strategy will occur only when at least 70% of oblasts are verified as accessible and free of military risk, confirmed jointly by both national unions. So this was the set of paragraphs they've just added, and you can kind of see and feel their heart about this. They don't want to wait forever to move forward on some of these things, and I'm grateful for their eagerness to move ahead. Then finally, the financial and relational investment. So what we're asking of each of our churches that are flagship churches here at the beginning is that you would commit to $10,000 a year that would go into a general fund that we use for infrastructure, for the development of these resources I've talked about, and providing curriculum and materials to the Ukrainian churches and those stateside that need them. So that would, and the BGCT has agreed to be the receiver for these funds. They've also agreed to invest them until we need them. So they'll be making interest as we kind of prepare to whatever is next steps. But that would be one piece we would ask of each flagship church. The second piece is that your church would send $500 a month directly to your church that you're partnering with. And this number of $500 a month is a number that the Ukrainians thought was pretty wise. Michael Gott and Jane actually brought the same number to me and thought this is what feels right to us for a lot of reasons. The Gotts were very, wanted us to know they think it's very important that it be done in monthly amounts, it be connected to specific projects, and that there be some kind of accountability about it. And there's just potential for misuse or for appropriations in ways that wouldn't have been what you had in mind. And they said protect the pastors there by setting up a tight accountability system and keep it at $500 a month instead of $6,000 in one lump sum or something like that for these reasons. And so there seemed like to be a lot of wisdom in that. Everybody on both sides has agreed. They've also agreed that the numbers should be the same so that somebody doesn't find out that they drew First Kaufman and then we're very disappointed they didn't draw First Baptist Midland. So the numbers will be the same for all of our churches, that we would kind of stay at this $500 number a month so that when the pastors are talking to each other, there's some equality about how all of that goes. All right, that's a lot of words for me, kind of laying out the strategy and our plan and what's ahead for us. I am sure that you may have questions about all the things that I have said today. Thanks for being willing to do it in this format so we could get this all on video.